tell Putin and thereby reveal American intelligence sources and methods, as he did in his first Oval Office meeting with the Russian ambassador and the Russian foreign minister in 2017. With Donald Trump, we've all known since he became a presidential candidate that there was a lot to worry about in a Trump presidency, and now American soldiers in Afghanistan and their families have much, much more to worry about tonight. Leading off our discussion tonight, Ben Rhodes, a former Deputy National Security Advisor to President Obama. He is an MSNBC political analyst. Ned Price is with us. He's a former CIA analyst and a former Senior Director and spokesperson for the National Security Council in the Obama administration. He is an MSNBC national security contributor. And at this hour, during the last few minutes, we've had breaking news reporting on this from the New York Times. I'm just going to read directly from the New York Times lead on this. American officials provided a written briefing in late February to President Trump, laying out their conclusion that a Russian military intelligence unit offered and paid bounties to Taliban-linked militants to kill U.S. and coalition troops in Afghanistan. Two officials familiar with the matter said the investigation into the suspected Russian covert operation to incentivize such killing has focused in part on an April 2019 car bombing that killed 3 Marines as one such potential attack, according to multiple officials familiar with the matter. Ben Rhodes, I want to start with you, working backward from the New York Times breaking news tonight, because they've been working over the weekend on that question of what did the president know, when did he know it, and the White House saying, well, no one ever said this to him. Now the intelligence community is letting it be known through the New York Times that there is a written briefing that went to the president that contained this information. That, of course, lives beside the known fact that Donald Trump does not read. What is your assessment of where this story is now?
Oh, my God.
Well, Lawrence, I got the PDB for over 7 years. I was one of the senior aides to President Obama who received both the written briefing of the presidential daily briefing and the in-person briefing that President Obama used to get. And first of all, the idea that he wouldn't have been briefed this material would be completely astonishing to me, because essentially you would get, in a course of several months, hundreds of pieces of intelligence. And something like this would be an absolute bombshell. And it goes to the heart of the responsibility of the commander-in-chief, which is the safety and security of American troops
Absolutely.
serving on his orders in Afghanistan in harm's way.
Absolutely.
And so either Donald Trump did not read his briefing, and nobody around him who also would have gotten this briefing made him aware of the fact that Russia was paying to kill American forces in Afghanistan,
Oh my God.
or he was made aware of it and did nothing. Frankly, either of those scenarios, in my opinion, are equally horrifying, because it goes to the central question of, does he even care about the safety, security, and lives of our troops in Afghanistan? And secondly, why is he so deferential to Vladimir Putin that he has done absolutely nothing about this, even since it was publicly reported he's done nothing about this? So I think there's a lot of threads to unravel here, and it goes to the heart, I think, of the fundamental corruption of our national security under this president in not caring about our troops and caring more about Vladimir Putin.
Ben, to stay with this, this is one of those stories that brings all the elements of Donald Trump together in one place.
Jesus!
I mean, you're shocked that Donald Trump would not know this information, but you've also been on this program in the past knowing that Donald Trump does not read the daily brief. He absolutely doesn't read it. That's a known fact. It's not disputed by the White House. He does not read. He will not read. You have warned us repeatedly of what that could mean, that there can be things in this brief that should be read. It can also inhibit people who are briefing the president, and they might not say certain things to him for a variety of reasons. But you have made the non-reading of this brief a dereliction of duty in itself, and now we have a very, very vivid example of what is at stake in the president actually using his time to read this. So the Trumpian defense of, I don't read those things and I don't know about it, the Trump White House, we know, is going to counter this with, he doesn't read that stuff, and they're going to try to still insist that he didn't know about it because he doesn't read this stuff.
So, in other words, what this commentator is trying to tell you is that there's no way that Donald Trump can plead insanity, because that is his job, to read these things and to know what's going on with our United States military. So it's either dereliction of duty to the extent that he just don't care what's going on with our United States military, or it's even worse than that, to the point that he's working against us instead of for us. I don't know. I'm sure this is going to be something that's going to unravel within the next 24 to 48 hours that could very well be an embarrassment to him and his family, to the point of dismemberment of the whole White House pertaining to this administration. This does not ever need to happen in anybody's administration, especially whenever it comes to the tides of our own personal well-being and safety of our military. It's sickening. It's appalling.
Well, first of all, Lawrence, if he had read his briefings, that he was getting in January about the coronavirus, tens of thousands of lives could have been saved if we'd moved faster to prepare this country for that. In this instance, it's the lives of our troops that are at stake. If his defense is, I didn't read this, why is he the president of the United States if he's not even meeting his highest obligation to the safety of our troops to read that briefing? Why are the people around him, if they're not going into his office and saying, sir, you need to read this, why are they not doing that?
Or why his cabinet members, of those that he circled around, not got enough common sense to see where this is a red flag event, to the point that if they can't make him read it, at least explain it to him. So either or, the buck stops at his desk. The buck stops at his desk, just like the death of the coronavirus people. So, I don't know. There has to be an invisible line in the sand to where enough is enough. To the not only the American people, but to the American military. Whenever they hear about this will pretty well be the end, I think, of Donald Trump ever even coming close to being elected president on the second term. And it may actually fall into the category of something even beyond that of high treason. I don't know. This is awful. This is awful.
Our troops? Is it because they think he doesn't want to hear that Russia is doing something like this because of whatever his complicated relationship is with Vladimir Putin? Because I can tell you, Lawrence, what any normal president would do as soon as they learn about this is, number one, pick up the phone to Vladimir Putin and say, we know what you're up to, and if you don't cut it out, there will be X and Y and Z consequences. And there's a range of things that the United States could do to impose consequences on Russia for this. Number two, we are in these peace talks with the Taliban. Get our envoy to the Taliban to say to them, if you don't cut this out with Russia, this whole deal is off. There are things that he could have done, never mind increased force protection for our forces, that would help save the lives of our troops. And if his best defense that he can muster is a public relations defense that suggests, well, I don't read things as president, so I didn't know about this. If that's the best defense he can muster, then he has no business being commander-in-chief of the United States military.
Ned Price, what about Nancy Pelosi's point, which is so powerful as you stare at it, where she asks the question, what if they didn't tell him because they were afraid of what he would do with the information that, like Ben says, he would pick up the phone and call Vladimir Putin, but the call wouldn't go the way you want it to. He would call Vladimir Putin and tell him, hey, they're telling me that you're doing the following things, and he would give him all sorts of information about how they obtained that information. And then Vladimir Putin would say, we're not doing that. And Donald Trump would, of course, say, I believe you, as he believes Vladimir Putin about everything. I mean, the Pelosi scenario of them being afraid of what Donald Trump would do with that information with Vladimir Putin is one of the more chilling versions of this.
Lawrence, there are only a few scenarios that could have played out in this case. None of them are good. All of them are, in fact, profoundly dangerous. It's possible he wasn't briefed, but as someone who has written PDBs, as someone who as a CIA analyst, as someone who has briefed the PDB, as a PDB briefer, as someone who has read PDBs from the White House, I find that absolutely inconceivable. The intelligence community would not be derelict in its duty, even if those advisors around President Trump are derelict in theirs. The second is more plausible, and that's that he was briefed and he's absolutely lying. I don't think anyone would be surprised by that. But the third scenario is the scenario that Speaker Pelosi, I think, rightly brings up, and that is that his team purposefully kept this from the president. And they could have done that in a couple ways. One is a little more nuanced and subtle, in that they could have included this in his PDB briefing, knowing, of course, that he doesn't read it, so it would be unlikely to elicit anger or reaction. Or they could have made the very conscious and chilling decision not to brief him because they knew he would pick up the phone or he would react in a way that would harm America's interests. And unfortunately, there's evidence to suggest he's done this before. In June of 2019, the New York Times reported that his team did not brief President Trump on implants that the United States reportedly had placed in Russia's power system in case it came to a confrontation with Russia. His team apparently kept that from him, according to the New York Times, thinking that he might undermine American national interests, as he has done time and again with Vladimir Putin.
For more reporting on this breaking news story, we're joined now by phone by New York Times national security reporter Charlie Savage. He is an MSNBC analyst, and he is one of the 4 reporters who have issued tonight's report. Charlie, tonight's report tells us that there was a written brief to the president that contained this information. And as I looked lower in your story, I find that there's a specific date specified by one source saying that they believe the president got the information in the February 27th brief. What more can you tell us about what you're developing in this reporting tonight?
Well, that's right. So we have previously reported that Trump was briefed. The White House has said we were wrong, and the New York Times School of Lies, and we said that we had one source saying it was sometime in this presidential daily brief, which is a compendium of written intelligence that is prepared for the president to read every day. So what we have today now, or tonight, is confirmation from 2 sources that it was in the written briefing to President Trump in late February. One says late February, the other source says February 27th specifically, and secondarily that it was disseminated more broadly within the intelligence community in a publication called The Wire that the CIA puts out for people with security clearances to read about the areas in their specialty on May 4. And so this is significant because it undercuts the White House's narrative the last sort of 36 hours that not only was President Trump never briefed, but this information was, they dismissed the information as contested and unverified and not serious and credible enough to bring to his attention. Those things which are put in the presidential daily brief, by definition, have met that standard in the intelligence community's mind. And then the further dissemination in the Wire publication in May underscores that. So that's the main new news this evening, and we'll see how Congress reacts to that. It'll be interesting to learn whether the Republicans who were invited to be briefed today by the White House were told that or not, and we'll get their reactions as this comes out.
One reaction comes from, in your reporting in tonight's story, from John Ratcliffe, the Director of National Intelligence, and among other things, he is reminding people that leaking to you is a crime. They clearly don't want to see you gathering any more information about this case. And John Ratcliffe's statement says that the unauthorized disclosures, quote, now jeopardize our ability to ever find out the full story with respect to these allegations. Charlie Savage, can you see, I can't see right now any way your reporting makes it more difficult for the intelligence community to find out exactly what's going on in the intelligence community.
It is a remarkable statement from the newly installed Director of National Intelligence, especially because we see here that this was a more confirmation, backing our earlier reporting, that this is not something new that they're still trying to figure out. This has been something that they were looking at seriously months and months ago and reached their assessment that it was true months and months ago. We previously reported when we broke this story last Friday that there was an interagency meeting at the White House convened to try to figure out what to do about the problem in late March. And now we see that it was already developed enough to go into the President's Daily Brief in February. And so the notion that, the issue that had some people upset was, even though they had figured this out and they were already developing options about what to do with it, the White House was not authorizing any response for months and months and months, not even a diplomatic knock it off to Moscow. And so the notion that only now, because this is coming out and suddenly members of Congress are finding out about it and asking questions and so forth, and members of the military who have deployed over there or who have friends over there are saying, what about this? Now they're saying, well, if you've leaked to this information to the news media, we're just going to prevent us from figuring out what happened. It's the leaks to the news media that have brought this to the public's attention, to the attention of Congress.
Charlie, the White House press secretary today said, and I'm quoting, there was not a consensus among the intelligence community, and in fact, there were dissenting opinions within the intelligence community, and it would not be elevated to the president until it was verified. Your reporting tonight shows that it was elevated to the president, possibly specifically on February 27th. It was elevated to the president in writing. But what about that question of consensus? Does your reporting show that there was an intelligence community consensus on these reports?
I think it's an oversimplification to describe as something as either having a consensus or not. There's a lot of different agencies and analysts who are looking at this from their own perspectives. Some, like the NSA, want to see a lot of signals intelligence, that's surveillance. Others, like the CIA or the Defense Intelligence Agency, are more confident with human intelligence, that's interrogations of detainees and confidential informants. And they have different levels of assessing their own confidence in that with different questions they want to ask. It's normal in the world of intelligence for there to be caveats, for there to be some disagreements about different aspects of it. Or you might say, here's one interrogation and they don't have confidence about that, but the overall constellation of intelligence arrives and coheres into a picture that there is broad agreement that something is going on here. And that appears to be the case in this situation.
Charlie Savage, national security reporter for the New York Times. Thank you very much, Charlie, for getting on the phone with us with this breaking news. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Good luck to all of us, and shalom.